Welcome. In this video, we'll show how to attach a process flow to a trigger. And in this particular case, we will attach this process flow to a file trigger so that whenever there is a new file that arrives in the folder, it will kick off this process right away. So when you have a process flow created, and suppose you have a file source as the first step in the process flow, double click on this file source activity, and in the properties panel down below, you need to make sure that the event context enabled is set to true. And what that does is that it will take the parameters as well as the file that the trigger will pass to this process flow dynamically at runtime, and it will override whatever we have defined in the file source activity at design time. So in other words, the file source activity, file path, and file name will be overwritten at runtime by the actual event that we will attach to this process flow. So make sure that the event context enabled is set to true. Now you go into your application screen, and here under the develop tab there is an events, and now let's create an event such as a file trigger. And here I have created a file trigger called customer data trigger. And in this particular file trigger, I am looking for a file in a particular folder, and if that file exists, then I will kick off the process. And there are three types of triggers within the file event. One is whenever a new file arrives, so you can select this option to kick off a flow only for new files coming into the folder. You can select the on file exists. If the files are already there, you want to kick off the process flow for those files, then you can select this option. And on file modified is if there's an existing file, if it gets modified, then you want to kick off the flow. So you can choose any one of these three options. And in the file include criteria, you can put in wildcards. So here I have put in a wildcard for a file that will have an extension of txt, and then if a file name has 231, then I want to pick up those files. And you can comma separate out multiple file include criteria in this field, and you can learn more about it by looking at the help guide. And the file base location is where the files will be listened to, or it will be pulled. So you can provide the actual file base location here. And then one of the key fields down below in the screen is the polling frequency. So you can set up how often you want to look for the files that arrive in a folder. Here I have defined a polling frequency of 10 minutes. You can change the duration by selecting the particular option you want from the drop down. And there's also a file stable time, which will wait for the file to be stable before it actually allows the event to trigger off the process. And one of the other key properties that we have in the advanced properties is that you can also have these process flows get triggered in sequence. So for example, if multiple files are there in the folder and you don't want to trigger all of these files and each of their related process flow at once, then you can select the sequence option so that the process flows do not run in concurrent manner or in parallel, they run in sequence. So again, that option is there. And once you have saved the file trigger, one of the other things that you can do is you can go to the process and attach this file event to a process flow. So the process flow that I created earlier is this one, customer data load. And as part of the action column, there is a bind event option. And once you select that, you can give a name for this particular attachment that you're doing. So here, this would be your customer data flow trigger, and this will be your registry of the process attachment with a trigger. So you can give any name and description to this process flow bind event. and you can select the existing event from this drop down. So this is my trigger that I created earlier as part of my file event. And here I'm selecting my specific process flow, which is already selected. And when you save it, it will then attach that event to this process flow. So to attach a process flow to an event, you go to the process flow and go to the action and click on bind event. So that screen will allow you to attach that event to this flow. So in order to have the event execute the flow automatically, or if you want to just trigger it to manually test if the trigger is working properly, the place where you have to go is events and go to file. So this is the same place where we went and created the event trigger. And this is the event trigger here with that name and description. And this view link also will tell you which process flow it's bound to. So here, if I click on view, you will notice that I've selected that particular process flow earlier. This is where it shows up here. So this is the flow it's attached to. And to test this process event, what you can do is you can go to the action of this file event manage page and go to that particular trigger and go to action and then select trigger now. So once you select that trigger now, it will actually execute the flow. So you can test to make sure that the event is properly triggering off your process. So once you have manually triggered it, everything is tested properly, then the last thing you want to do is you would go to the particular event, click on this checkbox here, and click on activate so that it actively looks for that file every 10 minutes in my case, and then if the file is there, it will kick off the flow. So this is where you can activate your event so that it runs automatically and kicks off the process flow, or you can manually trigger it as well, depending upon your preference. So once I have triggered this process, or if the events are kicking off these flows automatically after you have activated them, the monitoring dashboard allows you to monitor the runtime status of these events in terms of which flows they are running and what their statuses are. So here I manually ran that process trigger in that particular file event, and when I went to monitor dashboard and events, you would notice that it will show me a list of all the triggered processes, and it will show you all the recent ones. You can also go to the calendar event and look at the execution history for last several days, depending upon your preference. And the monitoring dashboard will also tell you what time the trigger ran the flow, what particular process it ran, as well as what the status of that process flow is. And it will also show you the event firing trend over the last 5 days. So this is the graph that will show you how many times this particular event has executed this flow. So here we ran this flow today, 31st March, and there are 2 instances that ran. And if you look at the very bottom part of the screen, if there's any error running this process, it will tell you what those errors are as part of the error message. So this is a very easy way for you to figure out what has failed and why based on this error description. If you have any questions on how to attach a process to an event to trigger off the flows automatically, please feel free to contact us at support@adeptia.com. This concludes the video. Thank you and goodbye.